Good afternoon.
Hi, Roslyn.
Hi, good afternoon.
Ikman here.
Hi, Iman.
Hi,
Roslyn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Roslyn.
Good afternoon, Dorothy. Dorothy, thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you too for answering my message. I've been doing so much reporting of my plants, hundreds of them, Madam Roslyn.
I see.
See I'm into begonias. Look at that. All these peperomia.
I see.
Yeah, all this, a lot. I'm into so much begonias, all these plants, so much. And hospital visitation. I did so much reflexology, patient's life. Yeah, yesterday, I met the most unusual 4 cases on the 6th floor of Sarawak General Hospital. Opposite is a lady, 1 month in SGH, kidney problem. The whole ureter tube is full of blood, and the sister who took care of her lost her patience because she shouted,
"Oh, wow.
How come you're not dead, It's so sad. Then I went over, help up. I said, let me feed her with the medication. And my friend, who is only 35 years old, a PhD, I think Dr. Henry would know her. She's a Swinburne lecturer. The whole skin, the 2 legs, they need to amputate because of high diabetic, high cholesterol, and overweight, and pancreatic stage 1 cancer. It's so, after seeing so many sick patients.
Dorothy, I think we need to start.
Yes.
So I please mute. Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very good welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining the Brown Bag Talk this afternoon on reforestation and circular economy in Sarawak, organized by Sarawak Development Institute and supported by New Dimension. For everyone's information, SDI's Brown Bag series is an informal sharing sessions by SDI members on pertinent current issues and concerns. Our speaker today is Dr. Henry Chan, Conservation Director of WWF Malaysia and an active member of SDI. Before we begin, I wish to remind all the participants of some of the housekeeping rules to ensure a smooth sessions for everyone. First is please remain muted while the session is ongoing to avoid any disruptions. And secondly, please use the chat functions to raise questions or comments during the presentation sessions or even during the Q&A sessions as well. And if time permits later on, we will open the sessions for live Q&A or interaction sessions. So without further ado, I would like now to invite Dr. Henry to begin the presentations. Dr. Henry, over to you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Let me share my screen first. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
You can see, yeah? Okay. First of all, I was express my appreciation to SDI and friends for inviting me, I think for the 3rd time now over the last few years. The second talk was last year, in which I talked about the work that WWF does in Sabah and Sarawak, and was using the example of our work in Sabah on the 3 pillars here of protect, produce, and restore. Protect the habitat for wildlife and for ecosystem services, and produce in a sustainable manner for palm oil and timber. And restore is about restoring important places for the connectivity, such as wildlife corridor. It was from that part of the discussion about restoration that led us to this topic about reforestation in the context of circular economy in Sarawak. It's also part of my various presentations to a number of forums. So a lot of these materials that you get from here is actually drawing from different information and different inspiration. So to put things into context, we look into the context of global warming, which is actually something that most of us are experiencing in one way or another. The diagram on the right shows that from the IPCC report over the last 1901 to 2012, you see that this everywhere in planet Earth have been affected in terms of the average surface temperature. And the way that we use our resources and the planet Earth trajectory of the temperature rise would go above 2 degrees Celsius, which in Paris Agreement, governments of the world have agreed that we must keep it below the 2 degrees Celsius. This is because of the use of energy and producing a lot of emissions, and our carbon sink, which is our forests and our marine habitat, being lost. So putting that into the global context, then we would see that actually Sarawak can potentially provide some of the solutions that the world craves for. The first is that when we fully implement our policies to have the 1 million hectare of totally protected areas and the 6 million hectare of the permanent forest reserves to be gazetted, we would have 7 million hectares as a carbon sink. This would constitute about 56 to 57% of our land mass. Having said that, we also know that much of our forested areas are actually degraded and deforested, and hence the Forest Department is embarking on restoration. Our country is also embarking on a campaign to plant 100 million trees throughout the nation. So by doing this, we can restore the efficiency of our forests as a carbon sink. Now to do that, we need a lot of money. In Sabah, our experience is that we need $1,500 over 5-year period to undertake the restoration. And in our WWF analysis of the country, we see that there is at least 1 million hectares throughout the country that need to be restored. So a lot of money is needed, and money that we don't have. So what I'm going to introduce here, drawing from the various inspiration, is to introduce the notion of reforestation in the context of circular economy as their instrument to combat global warming, and therefore this will become a model to attract financing. So this is the premise of my presentation. The Bureau of Malaysia, together with BCG, Boston Consulting Group, have come together to undertake a study based on BCG's experience in Germany, in South Africa, and in China, to identify what are the different pathways, different roadmaps towards planet Earth, or the country, moving towards what we call the zero net emission, which the diagram I will show later. But first of all, we let us look into the Malaysia's reporting to the Climate Change Convention. So in 2016, the emission that we have in the country is 335 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. Of these, about 75% come from the energy production. So comprising from power, electricity is 146, and transportation is 70%, 70 ton, and then others coming from the industrial processes, agriculture, land use change and forestry, LULUCF, or waste. Just to highlight to you what is waste and why is waste such a big source of emission. If Tunican doesn't come to collect your garbage within half a week, you can imagine how smelly, right, your garbage bin is. So the smell come from methane. It's a degradation of the carbon material. So waste actually in Malaysia constitute 27 ton. So we really have to understand where are all these different emissions coming from, and then we'll look into how the balancing of our emission with our sink. So this diagram is what you saw earlier, and from the LULUCF, these are basically our forests. Our forests actually can absorb or remove here about 300 metric ton of carbon equivalent. So it leaves 75 ton left here, which means that if you want to have a balance or zero net emission, we must reduce our emission, and we should increase our forestry as carbon sink. Therefore, we can zero out the carbon emission. So this is the study that WWF is doing with BCG. And if you look into the actual land use, because we're focusing on reforestation, this chart here shows that the bars here are the forest cover in Malaysia. So over time, our forest cover has been decreasing, but over the year year 2000, we find that the forest cover has increased, gradually increased, and this is a good indication. The increment does come from the effort to do reforestation. Now, another line is very important is the biomass stock gain per annum. This is measured by million tons. So you find that this line here corresponds here to the forest cover. So the more forest that we have, the more biomass that we can gain. The biomass here comes from the leaves, the shoots, the twigs, eventually getting into branches, and these are carbon, as well as leaves that drop to the ground and become humus. So over time, these are very important accumulation over the year. In the forestry, the foresters will tell you that on the average, a tree will accumulate 1 cubic centimeter of carbon per year, and of size per year. So all these are carbon that is sequestered from the atmosphere and through photosynthesis going to the plant, and lock up as carbon. Now this is a projection done by BCG, our partner, over to the year 2050. So from the earlier graph that we saw, the next few years is a very important time, and we as a country have to determine our land uses. You all know that Malaysia, way back in 1982, in the first Earth Summit, our PM then had committed to keep half of Malaysia under forest. And just only this year, our Prime Minister has launched a new forestry policy that commits the country into policy to retain the 50%. Now, what it means is that presently today we have about 55% of land covered by forests. So when we attain that 50%, it means that we would face deforestation, and conversion of the forest into other land uses. So under a business as usual scenario, the amount of forests will stabilize up to about this 17.5 million, and this is a projection and a business as usual. So what we need to do is through the climate change study, we need to increase the forest cover and to reduce the emission and to zero out our emission. Just let you know that these 4 charts that I show is working in progress. The source of information comes from Malaysia's biannual reporting to the United Nations, but the analysis is still, we are still refining our methodology, but basically we're tweaking here and there. So this information, please do not cite them, having looked into this analysis, we need to look deeper into the data on our forest degradation. For we all know that our forest is not completely virgin forest, only those in the national parks. So for that, we will make a reference to our study that the WWF, together with our colleague in Indonesia, has undertaken every 2 years. And we have an upcoming report based on 2019 data, which we are now in the final stages of editing. So from this report, based on satellite analysis, we look at all of Borneo, look at forest cover, and using the methodology of dividing Borneo into pixels. The size of 1 pixel is 250 meter. So by looking at the pixel, if the pixel is covered by forest, and the surrounding pixels are also covered by forest, that means that that particular area is forested area. So from that analysis, we find that this is on the map showing Borneo under forest cover. And how we define as forest as using the word, the definition intact forest. Intact forest is defined by, number one, just two definition. Number one is a cross canopy, when the tree covers are closed up. So that cross canopy shows that the forests are intact. The other is wherever there are degradations, yeah, but we can see different layers of tree canopies. So when we have different tree canopy layers, we see that this forest is recovering, yeah, and is going to be going back to forest condition. So therefore, we also define this as intact forest. So from this analysis, from the map here that we see here as green color, Borneo is divided actually into two, yeah, and 55% of our forest is actually covered by forest, and 45% is non-forest. This is a major analysis of the situation in Borneo. Our upcoming report, 2020, by having access to new satellite images, higher resolutions, we actually have a new figure, which I will not inform you now because we have to verify our methodology. Yeah, but the number that we are coming out is a very positive number coming from Borneo. The second thing that we need to look into is the status, yeah, of the forest. So the map on the left is divided into two major categories, yeah, of our forest. This is all these colored maps are actually the gazetted forest. So they are protected areas in the form of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and so forth. And the lighter greens are the production forests. This in Sarawak is called the forest reserves and protected forests meant for logging. So these are protected by law. Now, when we overlay this map over the map that we saw earlier, forest cover, which is the map on the left, we find that there are areas, there are the forest cover that have not yet been legislated, or what we call in Sarawak as state land. So state land can be converted. Yeah, so it's very important that the state ensure that these areas are identified to be gazetted, to fulfill our policy of 1 million plus 6 million hectare of forested area. So from this analysis, we found that from Borneo, of the total 77 million hectare, 45% is actually already under non-forest, under various categories of land uses. Now, the state land that we saw earlier, the forest cover yet to be legislated, constitutes 11%, and 27% is actually for timber production, and 17% is under protected areas. I'll come to the fourth map, which is the last map that I'm going to show. Now, just now we mentioned about the pixels, right? The methodology of looking at the 250 square pixel. If the area is covered by forest, therefore it's forested, obviously. Conversely, if that pixel is much degraded, it's barren or shrubs here and there, and that pixel is surrounded by other pixels that are also of similar condition, that particular plot of space is defined then as fragmented or degraded. Yeah. So these are the spots and places over Borneo. Yeah. In this orangey color. We couldn't do the analysis on the specific dimension of how much this area is, because the data that we have wasn't of enough resolution, to determine the calculation. So this really has to be done at the state level, by the respective authority using the latest satellite analysis. Okay, so I now move on to the next topic about reforestation. Places that have been degraded and need to be reforested. Much of our effort in the state to undertake reforestation is going for fast-growing species. This is to produce in the mass, acacia primarily. But really, if we want to undertake restoration, we should bring as much as possible, bring back the tropical rainforest, which is actually multiple layers. So these are the emergent trees, and these are the canopy layer, and this type of forest would then become a permanent carbon sink, because we do not want to plant and harvest them. So this isn't a tree plantation, but really it becomes a permanent forest. So it becomes a permanent carbon sink as well. It provides habitat for wildlife and ecosystem services. Now, to do this, unfortunately, There's no silver bullet. We have to restore, and it's very expensive and time consuming. First of all, we don't want to plant exotic species. Yeah, we want to plant indigenous trees, the likes of the the Belian forest, the mangroves and all the things that we see in our forest. And our our trees don't bear fruit every year. It's very much dependent on seasonal like El Nino and so forth. Yeah, so it's very time consuming and very expensive to go and source these seeds. And then you need to do nursery to to germinate them and plant them. And you also need to do planning and infrastructure throughout the forest. You don't just go and bring the nursery the potted plants and plant them. You have to restore the roads. They have been degraded, or the bridges have collapsed. So all these things needs to be done. Yeah. And after planting, you still have to maintain after 5 years. Why 5 years? We live in the tropical rainforest environment with year-round sunshine. We have a lot of rainfall, so a lot of competing crops will grow. Yeah, weeds, creepers, and climbers. This will just strangle the plants. So our experience in Sabah is that we actually can slash the growing the crops, the weeds 5 times in a year for 5 years. Only after the 5th year that the trees then break away from the surroundings and become able to grow independently. So wherever donors or funders come and support us, we said, please consider 5 years. Then you got to monitor and making sure that the trees are actually growing. Any dead trees or plants need to be planted again. So this is a very time consuming and expensive. So our experience in Sabah is that we needed to have $1,500 to undertake the 5 years project. And as I said earlier, if we want to undertake restoration for all Malaysia, covering about 1 million hectares, this is the money that we don't have, about 15 billion. So we need to frame this context of reforestation using circular economy, connecting it to climate change, and therefore to find a model to attract financing. So this is where I draw my inspiration from plastics and it's in the circular economy. So we all know that plastics, if you don't manage them, it get going to the waterway, it get flushed down to the seas. And plastics looks like jellyfish, in the ocean, in the seas. And jellyfish is the food of the turtle. So a lot of the turtles who that ate the plastics, thinking it's jellyfish, they eventually die. The other thing is that plastics will eventually break down into what we call microplastics. Yeah, it get ingested by the plankton, by the shrews, by the small little fish, and they become the food of the bigger fish. And at the end, when fishermen catch them, we eat this fish. We are also ingesting microplastics. Yeah.
Oh.
So really, there's a need now, to address this plastic waste. So these two diagrams here, the one on the left is on organic recycling. The one on the right is about mechanical recycling. So based on the organic recycling, I was talking just now about the waste in Turnican become very smelly. So what we do is the Turnican would take your waste, and process them, and those that can be composed, will be composted and becoming fertilizer, for agriculture. In some facilities, Malaysia is going for that now, of doing what you call incineration that will produce the waste into energy, convert it to biogas. So this agriculture crop, which is starch or carbohydrate, is then processed in the biorefinery, from carbohydrate to ethylene, to ethanol, from ethanol to ethylene. Ethylene is a premise for making plastics. So become a bioplastics. So likewise, on the right, where this is the materials that are not going to be composted, then we will go into recycling and going back to plastics. The other is that anything that cannot be disposed, cannot be processed, will be burnt into energy, and the energy here is where the other inspiration comes in. The product of the burning is carbon dioxide, so which is actually emission. But this emission is absorbed by the agriculture crops, and which becomes the starch for the processing into ethanol, ethylene, and then into bioplastics. So plastics actually come from petroleum, fossil fuel. So fossil fuel obviously is just to process it to diesel into benzene. Yeah. So what we can draw from this inspiration is that the crops that is planted for bioplastics can also be made into biofuel. So this is the message that I want to bring to you, that our reforestation can convert space into biofuel. So from here, I want to introduce the concept of agroforestry into the whole notion. So this diagram here shows about sub-Saharan Africa, where they planted trees, and the space in between you plant cocoa, as a form of agroforestry. So while waiting for the trees to mature, it take you 10, 15, 20 years, and while waiting for the canopy to close up, the space here can be planted, And the thing about cocoa and coffee is that they needed shade, The shade would delay the maturing of the seeds, which actually gains carbon and become the quality. And one of the reasons why the coffee and cocoa from our part of the world is of low quality is because farmers clear the land and plant the cocoa without the shades, and the product mature very fast, but consequently you don't have the high carbon content, hence the low quality. So growing from this aspiration is that you can actually plant other crops. So the theory of change of agroforestry in the context of circular economy and reforestation is, while waiting for the trees to grow, the space between the rows of trees is planted with starch, such as tapioca and so forth. And once the tapioca matures, we process them to ethanol and in turn refine to biofuel. This biofuel is then used as a renewable energy, to reduce and to replace fossil fuel, And this is a very important discussion now because the climate change discussion. Petronas has already moved away from from coal. They're looking into a low carbon economy. Likewise, CIMB Bank and my bank have also come up with a new policy that they will no longer finance coal-fired plants. So the thing then is that we need to find alternative. So we have solar, we have windmills. Sarawak has gone to hydropower. So these are additional avenues that we can find to generate that energy. So the outcome is the space between the tree, between the growing trees, become an additional instrument to combat global warming. We have to constantly bring back the narrative of global warming, because this way, the world can then come and support us. So I'll come on to my second last slide. To enable this whole notion of planting plants in the space, and then converting to ethanol, needs enabling condition. So these are the three main things that I can think through. Number one is the policies. We require the policy of the states to promote biofuel production in the reforestation project. And number two, we need R&D to ensure that the crops that we plant will be suitable for being processed into biofuel, and therefore can be mixed into the benzene and eventually replace coal and so forth. And the whole notion of planting requires a lot of funding, so we also need finance to come in. So at the end, what we can see is that from the context of the reforestation needed for Sarawak, if we can have this enabling condition in place, we would be able to produce biofuel in terms of economy of scale. So from the concept, we need to move on to actual roadmap, how this can be driven towards a goal. So what is needed is actually a kind of collaboration framework led by a competing authority or agency, involving the government agencies, corporate players, research organizations, and civil society to develop pathways, roadmaps toward attaining this goal. So with that, I now would like to just conclude by just saying that, looking into the forests that we have in Sarawak, Sarawak actually has a competitive advantage. We still have a lot of forests. Our policy is actually 7 million hectares, and we have more than that, at least 2 million more forests. So when we can convert these forests that we have and legislate them as our permanent forests, it also becomes a permanent carbon sink. And in places that have been degraded or places that we think are not suitable for agriculture, we can undertake restoration and therefore this will also increase the efficiency of our carbon sink. And talking about biofuel as a renewable energy, and Sarawak would then gain that competitive advantage at the global scale to remove greenhouse gases. So I think this is where I think if we put all these elements in place, having the relevant organizations and authorities to come together, we can then think through the process on how this notion of Sarawak becoming a permanent carbon sink can be promoted. So the question then is, where do we move from here? So way forward is, I hope that from our discussion today, with many people participating, we can then first of all say that, do we want to do it? Is it desirable for Sarawak to also consider our forest as a carbon sink? If yes, the question that we pose to ourselves through SDI is, what role does SDI do to promote this concept to the relevant stakeholders? So with that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. So we now there is a lot to think about. That is a very interesting conceptual framework that you have put forward as well. So I think before we go into the questions that you posed on the role and whether we are whether Sarawak is interested to look into this further, maybe we just look into comments and questions posed by the participants so far. So I think from Iman said about it's a good effort by Forest Department to plant 1 million trees. Is there any ways or mechanism to ensure the trees planted will grow well? I think you roughly touched on this, on the maintenance and the monitoring needed for the replanted forest to grow well. Do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, so just to go back into our policies, and in about year 1994, I think we started our Sarawak planted forest policies, which is to identify 1 million hectares of planted forest to supplement the declining natural resources. But if you look into the Sarawak Forestry website or the department, they will show you that the licenses given for that effort, I think so far they have planted like 300,000 hectares. Why has it taken so long to reach to that goal of 1 million? It's because it's very expensive. As I said just now, you need $1,500 US, to do the replanting and the maintenance. Actually, in about year 2000 as well, I think the federal government has allocated 100 million as incentive for corporation to do the planting, and we still can't do it. It's because planting trees is very expensive.
So you require sustainable financing, as you mentioned. All right, I think we'll go next from Madam Peggy. Is regarding I think the map that you showed just now is on the lowest forest cover and biomass stock 2007 to 2009. What factors or activity contributed to this reduction?
I think you're asking this map, right? Yeah. So I actually this morning, we had this internal discussion with our colleagues from BCG. I got a headache listening to them. There are a number of factors that they need to consider. Using values like GDP, how much, for example, palm oil contributes to the GDP of the country, and that GDP is divided by the land that's under palm oil plantation. The value of palm oil is a GDP. Vis-a-vis the value of forest. There are many factors coming there. That's why I'm saying that please do not cite this information, because we're still working on that. So it's measured by the economists will come up with some values. For example, that we used to say a lot of values that sometimes we do not capture, like during flooding, when governments have to compensate people affected by flooding. Who pays for that money, right? It's actually taxpayers' money. But the people who have degraded forests are not required to pay for that. So all these values are what the economists will come in and advise us. So I won't be able to answer you, Peggy, on this very complicated situation, but I can assure you that we would like to present this study to the Sarawak stakeholders here. And for the moment, we are focusing on the corporate sectors, the big government-linked corporation, to have a dialogue with them first. Yeah, we will then expand our analysis to the wider group of stakeholders.
All right, thank you for that. I think we will go next to from Mr. Moritz. This one is on. I will just read it out. Thank you for sharing your insights. One of my students has developed a land use land cover model of Sarawak using Landsat images, using a machine learning approach. I'll be interested to compare our result with your new updated satellite data, if that is possible. And on the note of reforestation, have you identified secondary forest areas that are particularly suitable for reforestation? Or do you have any plans to identify suitable areas?
Yeah, so under our present 2020 analysis of Borneo, we are actually looking into what we call secondary forests. Yeah, and we've been looking into definitions like Tamuda and the Iban and the Kayan's definitions of Talun and so forth. So, I'm an anthropologist, so I can use the Kayan, definition. So Talun is secondary forest, where after you plant your rice, you leave it back to fallow. Yeah. So Talun Ayak is all secondary forests. These are like 15 years and above. These are real mature trees. Yeah. And then you have Talun Ok, which is young trees. So the Talun Ok is divided into Talun G, Talun Dua, Talun Talok, yeah, first year and so on. So you really have to look into the actual situation. If the secondary forest has young trees looking like shrubs and so forth, I think that one, we really need to expedite either you go for conversion into agriculture, or you get the community to be involved in the reforestation. But if the forest is already old, like what they call Talun Ayak, 15 years and above, you don't need to do that anymore. The forest has come back. Yeah. So again, it depends on the site specifics.
Okay, noted on that. Okay, another question from Ipman. We should take advantage of our mass forest areas to diversify its revenues base by venturing into carbon credit trading. Any comments from WWF?
So this is not the WWF comment. This is the government of Malaysia's financing mechanisms called the REDD++, reducing emission on degradation and deforestation. So there are two ways of financing. One is to undertake reforestation. So companies, so the place that you do reforestation gives a credit. So that credit can be sold. Yeah. So it's a carbon markets. So what the government of Malaysia decided to do is to retain the value of forests within Malaysia. Yeah. So this credit should be sold to companies in Malaysia. All right. So these are domestic markets. But we also open up for areas that needs financing for conservation, because like national parks and so forth need maintenance, right? Need this monitoring. So these are going for international markets. Yeah. So this is our federal government trying to put a standard, increase the value of our credit in Malaysia, so that over time our forest has more value. So let me share with you today the carbon value per metric ton is $5. Now, we look right to the beginning of my presentation about planet Earth. Yeah, the amount of forest to go back into the carbon sink. The WWF has done analysis. We need $150. Yeah, so $5 today is what the market is offering you, but what is needed is actually $150. And we have just another article that I read with the new US President Biden's policy. They believe that the value of carbon arising from Biden's policy will be about $85. So it's also good to wait and see how these mechanisms evolve through the markets.
I see. Okay. Next one is from Roger Harris. What is the role of the communities living in areas for reforestation?
Yeah. So maybe you cycle back to why we have a lot more forests in Sarawak that has not yet been legislated. one of the discussion I have with our forestry colleagues is that the forest ordinance that we have, the instrument to legislate forest, is very exclusive. Yeah, when they legislate land, as forest, they will ask community to inform government whether you have rights or not. And if the right has been established, the government will compensate you, yeah, and therefore you lose your rights to that forest. So for that reason, many communities do not want the forest to be legislated. So what we need to do is to identify other instruments that enable forests claimed by community to become a permanent forest. So under the Convention for Biological Diversity, CBD, they have come up with other instruments called OECM, other effective conservation management areas, that did not necessarily be legislated by governments. Yeah, as long as there is an instrument that protects this place to be permanent forest cover, that will also be acceptable. So in this case, what the government can do is using whatever legal instrument that you have, identify the OECM, and get the communities claim land, whether it's actually claim or based on other based on certain tenure, yeah, to institutionalize this community forests to be recognized, and therefore it can go into this carbon narrative, because nobody can buy carbon from you unless there's a legal assurance that this land will not be converted.
I see. Okay. Okay. Next one is from Madam Sim. Our state sustainable forest management efforts tie in very well with the circular economy. What's the status at the moment? And then another question is, what is your view on getting NCR landowners to participate in this reforestation effort?
So the first question you are asking about status of the SFM, yeah. There are two dimensions of the narrative. One is that SFM is meant to be sustaining your timber production, yeah, in a sustainable manner. So this is then going to the markets defined by certification. So the government in the era of the previous Chief Minister, the late Tan Sri Adan Satem, has made it mandatory for all the hard borneo areas to be certified. And of course, our present Chief Minister has maintained that policy, and not only the hard borneo area, but also going for the forest areas that have long-term license. Yeah. So I don't have the figure for you, but if you go to the Sarawak Forestry website, they will show you. Yeah, I think concessions that have been certified. So from zero in the year 2000, from only one certified area in 2008, I think we have about 10 areas that have been certified now. Your second question about NCR,
yeah, NCR landowners to participate in reforestation effort.
Yeah, so planting trees or planting crops, right? It's just like planting rubber, plant cocoa, right? You must have a market. It's a market that we don't have now. There is no buyer. So if you plant typical, who is going to buy from you, right? That's why I was talking about the third area of the enabling condition. You really need the oil and gas companies to come in to actually look into how they identify these biofuel as a new energy, to be mixed into the benzene or into the diesel, into the kerosene, or for example, the independent power plants who are now using diesel or coal, to use biofuel as a source of energy. This is what we don't have today. So we cannot ask a community to plant typical by the thousands of hectares, right, when there's no buyers. So all these things, what I mentioned in front of you, needs to be done before we can actually embark on that journey.
Okay. Next one is from Dr. Lau Seng. How do we offset the loss of incomes, private and state, during reforestation?
How do we offset the loss of income?
Private or state during reforestation.
Yeah, reforestation. First of all, let us look into I won't be able to answer you directly, Prof. Lau Seng, but to lay out the conditions. First of all, the investments is very high, and the gestation period is very long. If you plant it for pulp and paper, it's 7 years. Okay, For furniture, once the acacia mature, the hardwood, it will take you about 10 to 12 years. All right. So there's the theory behind that. Now, for pulp and paper, you have to have a pulp and paper mill, to process this into pulps. And this is a multi-billion dollar industry. The Sarawak Planted Forest project in Bintulu is actually meant for that. And they couldn't take it off, So it's very expensive both for the state. And now the companies in the Bintulu area planted for acacia, they are not converted the supposedly meant for pulp now into timber, and it takes them 12, 13 years to grow. Now, the problem with acacia is that you have a lot of problems in the root rot and so forth. And after 15 years, they will just become, become too old, So the proper type of trees needs to be done. And I think I come from Sarawak Forestry Corporation. I was together with the R&D group, and we also at that point were studying the suitable trees for planting. So I think we are still way behind in terms of generating the actual type of trees, for the furniture making. But if we talk about going back to what I was showing this diagram here, try to mimic, back into forest, going back to natural forest, it will be a different values that we are looking at, So number one, we're talking about the value coming from carbon that can be counted, Second is the value that comes from ecosystem services, how forests can come back into retaining the rainfall, prevent flood and prevent erosion, and so forth. So these are values that we don't count, right? Just now I mentioned about when there's a major flood that happens, people, the victims need to compensate it. Government give them money. Who accounts for the money? That money is our money, right? It's the taxpayers' money. So this way, there are many equations to answer your question, Prof. Lau. I think better get the economists to come in and give the answer to us.
Okay, next one is from Mahkamah Bumiputra, Mr. Baweng. Can we combine carbon trading with reforestations under license for planted forests?
The LPF, license planted forest, is presently depending on the license. Many of the companies around now, as I said, planting acacia, fast growing, and they hope that it can be. So first of all, the pulp and paper mill didn't pick up in Sarawak, so planting it to be turned into veneer. So you slice it, thin veneer, right, and make it to plywood. So they're not clean carbon into the whole equation. That's why they're planting it to be fed into the mill, so it's not economic for them. That's why I'm introducing this element of circular economy into the LPF narrative. So, and it needs government policy to allow this to happen, because who is going to buy from you if the policy doesn't encourage the carbon credit?
Next one is from Dr. Lau Seng again. 8% of our emission is from waste. What are the efforts been done to handle the waste generations and management issues?
So this question would be answered by 27 metric ton. During the launch of the Ministry Climate and Energy, I was one of the speakers, and the other speakers from the Deputy Secgen from the Ministry of Local Housing. So they were sharing the plan, our government under the Shore of Malaysia plan. So I mentioned just now about the incinerator, and they're going to build 6 plants in Malaysia, turn this to the energy. So we talk about waste management. It's actually about how you segregate the waste at the household level, making sure that we already, the organic waste set aside, plastic waste put aside, and then you go to the collector, the sorter, to sort it out. So what government Malaysia, both by the CASA and the KPPT, the Local Housing Ministry, is looking into a new initiative called EPR. EPR is Extended Producer Responsibility. So it's like when you go to the Western countries, you buy your beer, and then that beer bottle, you put it back into the machine, in the €1 comes out, right? So basically, it means that we, the consumer, are paying in advance for the processing of our waste. Yeah, it's called extended producer responsibility. So Coca-Cola, for example, when they produce the plastic bottle and processing the drinks, we sold into supermarket, they would put a value, that is equivalent to processing the Coca-Cola bottle to us as consumer. Yeah, so that responsibility is shared by Coca-Cola and us as consumer. So the money that is being generated would then go into a institution. They will then pay to Trinity, for example, or to other collectors. Yeah, and they will sort out the material. Some goes to compost, some goes into recycling and so forth. Yeah, so this is what the two ministries are considering, and the Rev Malaysia is working behind to support the promotion of the EPR, extended producer responsibility.
Okay, noted on that. The next one is from Mr. Charlie. Timber licensees should have done reforestations instead of just extracting timbers. Forestry department, state government should impose reforestations as one of the terms and conditions of approval in issuing OT.
Well, under the forestry ordinance, as well as the forestry policy, after harvesting timber, the forest department will go and check, and if the place is degraded, then they would undertake what we call silviculture. Silviculture is to either you plant back the forest or you don't. Yeah, against depending on the condition. So under sustainable forest management, you don't have to do that. Yeah, because the amount of timber that you extract is based on certain formula, what we call annual allowable cut. Annual allowable cut, AEC, is dependent on the growth rate of the timber over time. Yeah, so rightfully you don't have to do that. The question is, of course, what we call non-compliance, and that's when the enforcement has to come in, and then your certification, which is a voluntary third-party assessments to ensure that a whole sets of conditions will be in compliance by the company. If they are in compliance, they get certification, and they will have access of selling the timber to various markets. So this market-driven instrument is better than enforcements. Yeah, because Sarawak, right, is a large place, and to really go to the forest, deep into the forest to monitor the logging condition, you need a lot of staff, and staff that we cannot afford to hire. Yeah, so it's better to let the market drive the process through certification.
Okay, next one is from Encik Sirai. Safely, I can say that about 500 hectares of native customary land are forest covered. Due to very little interest among the younger generations to cultivate the NCR land, most of the NCR landowners propose to develop their lands through joint venture with private companies, with expectations to earn between 700 to 1,500 per hectare per year. Do you think carbon trading, carbon credit can offer them better income? So this, I think, is related to carbon trading issues that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So this morning, internally with my colleagues with BCG, we were talking about the values. Yeah. What's the values of planting palm oil and rubber? Yeah. Two of the major commodities for the country, compared with the value of forests. So here you're asking about local communities. Yeah. And I'm an anthropologist, as I said earlier, and from our experience, everything people plant depends on the markets, right? Market price. When paper price is high, everybody will plant paper, and when everybody is not just in Sarawak, it's also around the world. Yeah. So when Brazil and Latin America start planting paper, the price will collapse. Yeah. So people convert to cocoa, which was then the high price. Same thing happened. There's a mass market, and cocoa price collapsed. So people chop cocoa. And today is palm oil, right? So palm oil being a volatile economy, the price is dependent on a lot of factors. Yeah, if that, Latin America is planting cocoa, that's palm oil. So is Africa. We know because the BRF is monitoring this. You will come to one day when there will be a glut of palm oil in the world. So, as an anthropologist, throughout my work, I seldom want to promote cash crops to the community without understanding what actually the market condition is. So with this now, climate, we all know that we cannot depend on fossil fuel to power our economy. So we depend on solar, depend on hydropower, depend on windmills. So I think this biofuel is one of the mixes of the energy. So if Sarawak government and the Sarawak stakeholders come up with the relevant condition, ensuring that the likes of Petronas and Shell, and all these petrol company actually participate in ensuring that the whole, the energy. I just repeating myself now. The petrol that we use has a high mix of the biofuel. You need to create a sustainable markets with the price. Then only you go to ask the IBAN, the Kayan up there to plant this thing. So without those enemy conditions, I wouldn't promote this idea.
All right. I think the next questions will, lead very well into what we can discuss further, which is on the enabling conditions. So Encik Rashid mentioned there is like the concept itself is very good, but how can we get the technology know-how for the biofuel productions here in Sarawak? Which agency can help? So I think this is relevant to your either policy, finance, and R&D areas that you have mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, first of all, conversion of starch, oil, vegetable oil into energy is nothing new, right? In the US, they converted corn into ethanol. Here, a number of in Malaysia, a number of palm oil companies are exporting the palm oil to make to biofuel in Europe, and because palm oil is associated with biofuel is associated with palm oil is associated with deforestation. So now Europe is also trying to close up the subsidy coming from biofuel from palm oil. That's why our Prime Minister and Indonesia sue European Union through the World Trade Organization. The technology is there already. Okay, it's a matter now to actually look into the site suitability of the soil that we have in Sarawak. What kind of crops can generate high amount of carbon? And you need some R&D there. Now, I want to point out another factor, which I speak as a delivery person now. We cannot allow food to be converted into non-food, right? The global population of 9 billion and more need food, and food needs space, So we cannot turn food into biofuel, and that is the dilemma that we're facing. So what I am articulating with my colleagues around the world is, and talking with our government is, you need to have a proper land use plan. Certain percentage of the land of the country must be dedicated for food production, for food security into our future, depending on our population growth. So we have secure amount of food. So places that are meant for forests, in this case reforestation, the thing that we plant between the trees shouldn't be considered as food, right? But that argument can only be acceptable to the world when you have the other policy of having food security. So this is one context that we must be considered. Otherwise, the whole notion of biofuel can then be demonized again as causing deforestation and causing, food scarcity. So it's very important. As I said, policies of government must come in. You must have forests. Hence, I put right here in the middle, we have a permanent forest covering. So this is a space that we need to look into alternative crop, which unfortunately have to come from carbon, because carbon carbohydrate makes into fossil fuel. So carbon is also associated with food, right? Unless you consider planting trees like jatropha or shrubs like jatropha that will produce fuel, then it's no longer as food. So that's why R&D is needed to identify what is the suitable crops to be planted suitable to the land that we have in Sarawak.
All right. Okay, I think moving forward, there are comments that they are interested to know about the comparisons of data that Swinburne has just now through Mr. Morris with WWF. So I think that is something that we can explore later. And then from Mr. Alex, is there any plan for Sarawak government to make recycling mandatory to solve the issue of waste separations, and how efficient is the waste management in Peninsular Malaysia since the federal laws for recycling program has been passed into law. Maybe any comment on that?
I can only comment about the no plastic policy. Yeah, actually, it's no single-use plastics. That's why I think everybody now is implementing that. If you go to the supermarket, you want to buy plastic, they charge you 20 cents, right? And they will promote us to bring our own bags. And now the government is also putting a policy that they don't allow plastics to be used for events. So I think it's a thing to be picked up by institutions. Yeah, the notion of circular economy and waste management, as I said earlier, the CASA and KPPT are looking into taking up EPR as a policy to promote waste management. From our study in Germany, looking at the affluent society, how much waste they generate, I think if we can implement EPR in Malaysia using that kind of formula, we could generate every year $1 billion ringgit, revenue coming from waste management to recycling into compost and so forth. Something that I think government should look into, and they're looking into that now.
All right. I think based on the chat here, we have another question for Mr. Robert. Mr. Robert Hadin, is there a platform for carbon trading here?
Yes. I think the answer is partially yes. As I said just now, the ministry overseeing natural resources have the R&D financing mechanisms, but this is still very new. So we hope that some of the financial institutions would come together, set up maybe an exchange. We know that in Chicago years ago they have the carbon exchange markets. So I don't know. I don't have the answer.
All right. I think we still have time. I think we still can allow for a few more questions. But if there is any ones who would like to come in and share, I think please let us know. We can unmute your microphones, especially on giving your views and inputs on what Dr. Henry have put forward as the conceptual this slide, the conclusion and way forward. Like on the policies needed, on the sustainable finance needed, and also the R&D. These are the enabling conditions that Dr. Henry have put up earlier on. May I invite further comments from the participants, whether this is something that is viable for Sarawak, and how can we move forward? Any comments, any immediate or reactions from the participants on this concept? Anybody who want to speak or to share, just let us know. We can unmute please unmute yourself, and maybe we can just let you share. Any takers? Or any questions further for Dr. Henry to clarify this concept further on how we can reach this goal together moving forward? Okay, I have none from somebody, from Mr. Melvin. Anyone else? Maybe from NREB, maybe I can invite Madam Peggy to share her reactions, the thoughts on this. No takers?
Maybe I just come in one more item based on our experience from Sabah, and throughout the country. So we are promoting Sabah, a lot of our work because of orangutan and elephants, increasing the value of the commodities in those places, like palm oil friendly, to elephants. Peninsular Malaysia is on tiger. Sarawak, we don't have any of the sexy or iconic species. What we have in Sarawak is there's a new notion called avoiding deforestation. If Sarawak government, take this up, said, we have a policy of 7 million hectares, right, which is about 57%. But we actually have more forests left. If we as a states, and people say that, look, we want to retain our forests, and therefore we avoid deforestation. That is a Sarawak narrative to the rest of the world. So a lot of things that I'm talking about is how you position ourselves, how we put a value of our story into that. Yeah. So although we don't have orangutan, because orangutan are already kept in the protected areas, we can actually use that notion of deforestation, avoiding deforestation, yeah, and also restoration. That's why I put the next slide just now. And Sarawak actually has the potential to be a powerhouse, yeah, in terms of the climate change agenda.
Yeah. Okay, I think maybe I will just there's another question, sir. Sarawak has the autonomy in the management of its natural resources. How does Sarawak fare in engaging into proactive carbon-sensitive policy compared to West Malaysia and Sabah?
I can't answer that question well enough. I'm not in the discussion with the state governments here. But we do know that as the Constitution provides us the autonomy, is up to the state. Now, just now I was talking about the federal government's the financing mechanisms for carbon. Yeah, while the government, the country as a whole, want to institute this type of common policy, the states have given the autonomy or freedom to choose their own way. What the government is worried is that we may be shortchanged because the world is very desperate for looking into carbon credit, because like countries like in Europe, if you don't change your practices to reduce emission, by putting I take example, Volkswagen was fined by the billions. What was fined all about? They put a measurement system of counting how much emission, pollution coming from the car, and the U.S. government found that they falsified it, so they were fined by the billions. So why didn't they just put a catalytic an instrument to reduce the emission? Now to do that, right, they had to change the machinery of the cars, and it would cost them billions and billions. So so countries in Europe would say, if you don't change the industry and you don't buy credit, I'm going to tax you. So you'll find friends who are living in Germany, for example, said, after certain years, the tax to your car is so expensive that you might as well buy a new car. Yeah. So the carbon market is there. But definitely the price today isn't as good as yet. So if you do not know the bigger development of the climate energy, you might be shortchanged by some people offering you cheap price.
Okay, noted. All right. Anybody else who want to share their thoughts on this? Maybe from the finance. Okay, there's another one from anybody? Oh, PPK Belaga. Are you interested to ask questions? They have unmute themselves. Oh, maybe it's too. Okay, there's another question from Mr. Anthony. Does cutting trees, does the cutting of trees to get stingless bees has a significant effect to this?
Cutting trees to domesticate bee, you mean?
No, to get stingless bee.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Mr. Anthony can ask these questions, because this question is not this significant effect to reforestation issue. Cutting of trees to get stingless bee.
Oh,
I think significant effect.
Yeah, I think if you cut the trunk, right, to make for the bees, well, how much trunk you need, right? Isn't that many? Like I think it's not significant. But you asked me a question: will bee farming can be contributor to the climate change argument? I say yes, because to generate honey, right? You need nectar and pollen. So this come from trees as well. So if we plant barren land with crops that can generate nectar and pollen, it's good. I can just give an example. My brother-in-law in Barrio, he raised stingless bees, and he said there's no way where the bees go to, but next to his what you call it, the beehives is actually forest. So I think that the bees actually go to the forest and collect nectar and pollen, and bring back to the hive. So forests are very important for bee production.
So definitely this is a good good business.
Additional income.
Yeah, additional incomes.
Mm.
All right. Is there any more questions from the participants?
I just want to maybe say a conclusion remark since I think people had more to ask. We needed an institution, a group of people, like-minded people, to come together and talk the way through and develop what you call roadmaps. So, for example, our goal is basically right at the end to produce biofuel in terms of scale. So we need the likes of Petronas and Shell to come in and set aside some sort of investments to say we want to promote R&D, and then we would ensure that our mix is done. So you need a roadmap that would motivate these two big giant companies to go into that. Then you also need to identify places where you do the planting. So again, you need a roadmap, identifying such places to do the planting and what kind of trees to plant. It's not just planting anything. You also want to ensure that if it's important for wildlife conservation, you plant trees suitable for that. If the area is important as a watershed management, you also need to plant the suitable trees. So there are a number of factors that need to come in. And I guess when I share this thinking to a number of institutions, people like it, but we don't have the momentum to drive this. That's why I'm sharing this with SDI, hoping that being an institution that has members coming from different agencies, will have the interest for the members to say, let us come together and and develop some roadmaps that would then enable SDI to then go to the different stakeholders in government institutions to say, look, these are the proposed pathway. Can we advance from that? That's why I said this roadmap is very important. This is not an issue or a subject matter that any one institution can handle. It requires many organizations to come in.
Correct. Yeah, there's a need for a very strong public-private collaborations and partnerships as well. All right. I think with that note, I think I would like to thank Dr. Henry once again for the very insightful and very interesting sharings with everyone today. I think before we close or before we conclude, I would like to invite everybody to turn on their camera. Let us take a group photos for our record for today. Just for everyone information as well that the slides and the recording of these sessions will be available at SDI website. So give us maybe a day to put it up. Then we will see. So hopefully you can download the information from there.
Yeah, the report that I mentioned, the maps, is also a public document. So I also shared it with Rosalind, so you can also have that report.
So we will also include the report where the maps were obtained earlier on. So we will include that in the for everyone to download or to read if they're interested to find out more.
So for the people in Balaga, Nunanga, because I was in Umakahai, Umadaro,
Sayu.
My name is actually Kabing from Umakahai, Dian from Umadaro. Yeah. So those of you who might know me there.
Dr. Henry, maybe you can stop sharing so that we can take the photo.
How do I go to do that?
Okay,
Now?
I will take the snapshots page by pages, because we have 220 participants. So just keep smiling
Have you already stopped sharing? Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, and
Mhm.
everyone to turn on their
If you are able to turn on your camera, please do
Correct.
so. So that we have records. Hi, Dr. Lao Seng. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Madam Grace Frances. It's good to see everybody, some familiar faces.
Okay, just keep on smiling, yeah. On 4 more pages. Okay, done.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you in our next brown bag or next talk. Till then, stay safe. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yo,